the primary challenge that we are all called to is to make a decision. If we just want all the comforts without risking anything or sacrificing, that is cowardice. Life is challenge. If you don't want challenge, you don't want life.
Welcome to the Masters of Business podcast with Daniel Beer.
Life, suffering, manipulation, and courage. This is another episode of Masters of Business. Guys, I'm your host, Dan Beer. And on this episode, we're going to go deep into the psyche, into aspects of life that make life worth living itself, that make life difficult, that is this tiny, thin thread between success and failure, but not just in a business sense, in a life sense. Now, this is a business podcast, but I have to tell you, you're going to hear me reference an event that I was at recently, probably over the course of the next while. It was a mastermind of some of the biggest business leaders in the world. I mean, just amazing people that have accomplished so much, a who's who of names, people you'd recognize over and over. And I'll hold a lot of the names just close, just for confidentiality, but I have to tell you that the thing that struck me the most, the biggest lesson coming out of this thing, is how few conversations were about money, how few conversations were about business tactics and strategies. And don't get me wrong, there was a ton of it, and I'm happy to share it with you. But you would think that would be all that was there in a business mastermind, multi-six-figure access fee to get in. And instead, the biggest focus was in the inner game. That focus on inside-out living instead of outside-in. And life, suffering, manipulation, and courage are just four areas, the very important areas that were discussed at great length. And I want to bring you some of those things that stuck with me that I'm bringing into my personal life and into my business, because it is absolutely for damn sure. I was told by my coach, my business coach, John Cheplack, he's been a guest here on this podcast. You can go find his episode. It's awesome. And he's always said that whatever's going on privately will show up publicly, and he could not be more right. And so it's the reason why people playing at the game, at the level of game that these folks, 50, 100, 200, 500 billion dollars of net worth are playing at, or it's the reason why they're so focused, uber focused on the inner game. And so I'm just going to start riffing with what stuck out at me. And number one, something I definitely take with me, life equals challenge. Life is challenge. If you don't want challenge, you don't want life. You cannot separate them. You cannot choose one or the other. They come as a package, or you get neither one. And a lot of the time, it's just placing your awareness on just that alone will make so many other things easier. Why am I going through this? Why is this happening? What if you can move past that and accept? And in fact, what if challenge showed up and you could say, thank you. Thank you, Earth. Thank you, God. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, whatever it is that you want to thank for the challenge in front of me, because I know this means I'm alive and I get to grow. And it was really clear, right, talking through it. Jordan Peterson is an example. He joined us in the mastermind for and gave just the most beautiful talk. And if you don't know Jordan Peterson, by all means, please look him up. He's amazing. Just one of the most brilliant minds of our time. No question about it, of an entire generation. It stuck out at me. So he said, people are miserable, anxious, stressed, depressed, unhappy when they don't have enough challenge. And well, it's because they don't have enough life. If they don't have challenge, life equals challenge. Now, on that subject of suffering is an interesting thing, because a lot of people will avoid life's, opportunities, adventures, even the challenges themselves. They'll be avoided out of the fear of not wanting to suffer. And yet what's very interesting is, right, like if you think about it, no, I don't want to go into the mountains and climb because I don't want to suffer. I don't want to be, I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to go into a study of just myself, my inner work. I don't really want to get to know myself because I don't want to suffer. Here's the one, a really interesting one. I've been sharing with people how I'm interested, highly interested, and I just need to take action on this. Frankly, I've been talking about it for too long. In a darkness retreat, 6 days in the dark, period. Not a sound, not a shred of light. You go in, you orient yourself to the room. There's a bed, there's a bathtub, there's where your food comes in through a double access door, right? So they put the food in, close the door so that there's no light that comes through, then you're able to open. And so anyway, people are deathly afraid of the idea of being in the dark for 6 straight days. But while that sounds normal, like, yeah, Dan, that sounds terrible. Think about what we're really saying here. What we're really saying is that you're scared to death of being by yourself. Or let me rephrase that. You're scared to death of being with yourself. Interesting. Like, it's interesting that one of the scariest things that we can do is be with ourselves. It is literally frightening to do that. That's all a darkness retreat is. There's no boogeymen in there. There's nothing. It's just you. And it's a scary as hell thought. That is fascinating. And so anyway, when it comes to suffering, we do all these things to avoid suffering. But what happens if we never have adventures? What happens if we avoid all that is challenging because we might suffer through it to some degree? What happens if we never go and explore the beauty of what this planet has? Get into the mountains, get into the ocean, all these different places what happens? Here's the real kicker. What happens if we never get to know ourselves because we're afraid to suffer? So what happens is you start to live an ordinary life. Now let's think about what that looks like, how that shows up. People living an ordinary life without any of those adventures. Well, I think that if we observe them, we could very well argue that they are indeed suffering. They're suffering because they're at the end of life, regardless of their age. Because challenge equals life, or said differently, life equals challenge. And so if you really think about the biggest breakthroughs in your life, the biggest moments of change, of positive change, of connectedness, of shifts, the shifts that you've experienced, they're found on the other side of suffering. And I've long talked about, I've given talks on stage about forced suffering. And frankly, I understood, and that's why I gave the talks, I understood at some level how important that was. But it's only recently come truly into frame for me, how important it is that we understand and appreciate and are thankful for those times when we suffer, because on the other side of that is all the growth. It's like the old saying, on the other side of darkness is light. On the other side of extreme darkness is extreme light. I mean, it's a yin and yang. It's a balance that is so perfect, so beautiful. And there's really no way to capture that kind of light without the darkness. And the same is for the growth that's available to you and to I, to me, to we, to us as human beings. If we can build a different relationship with suffering, if we can reframe it, if we can have a different perception of it. What if when something hard came up, what if when something difficult presented itself and you were in a struggle, what if instead of, oh gosh, no, I hope this is over, oh my God, how do I get out of it? What if instead of that you said, oh my gosh, thank you. This is hard, but this means I'm about to grow. This means I'm about to change, evolve. I'm about to become a better version of myself. It's an amazing thing. It's interesting because it really is never late to change or too late to change. It's never. We're familiar, all of us, with the concept of reincarnation, whether you believe in it or not, right? You're in this life and you're learning lessons and you're evolving and you come to the end of life only to reincarnate, to have this new beginning in a different, I'm not right. It could be as yourself. It could be as a bird. It could be in some other entity where you will then learn whatever is next and whatever is ahead. But what if you didn't have to die to get there? What if that exact and equal experience was available to you and me right now, right here, in this current life, on the current journey? See, in death, it's called reincarnation. In life, it's called recreation. And it is not ever too late to recreate oneself. I learned man, it was like I just learned the most wild story, thing. It's a crazy thing. There's an eagle. And I still need to go, frankly, verify what eagle, or if it's all eagles, or if it's bald eagles. But there's an eagle. I'm told you can just go YouTube this, okay? Go YouTube rebirth of an eagle. That when an eagle gets to right about 40 years old, it has a decision to make, an existential decision, a choice to recreate itself or to die. So apparently, the eagle will either, it faces this choice, this opportunity to extend its life. But to do so, it must tear out its claws, break off its beak, and then it all regrows, and there's like a rebirth of sorts. And that for whatever reason, if it does not do that, the eagle dies. So at the age of, I believe it's 40, the eagle faces a moment at which it either must accept its imminent death or go through suffering, go through pain, go through recreation. And it gets an entire new 40 years of life in front of it. It's the most amazing story. To do that, though, think about what's required. Because you and I, we face the same thing. Now, we don't have to go break off our beaks or, tear out our claws. But what happens if you're just kind of the same and the same and the same, and there's no growth over the course of your life? What if you never recreate yourself? What if you literally just sit there and lay there in your infantile comfort doing nothing? See, I believe that also leads to death. And what's interesting, though, is we don't have that timeline like the 40 years, like the eagle. We don't have that. By the way, our businesses, how about that? Do our businesses have to evolve, change? Is everything that I'm talking about applicable to business? And by the way, who the hell is running these businesses? People, you and me. That's why this entire conversation is a business conversation. Back to the point I was making. The eagle has this 40-year timeline. Well, it can be true that a human being might live 80 years, 70 years without having a huge amount of growth, or maybe dies at 45, 50 from, that lack of growth manifesting itself from too much pizza and Doritos on the sofa and dying of a heart attack. And both of those are possible. But what if, and I just invite you to entertain this thought, what if for us human beings, it's not measured in the rebirth, the recreation that's available during life is not about a set standard amount of years, meaning somebody could live 50, 60 years that have gone through this process, have grown exponentially more, experienced more, had more wisdom, awareness, consciousness in magnitudes than someone who lives to the age of 90, who had a longer life, who had a fuller life, who had a bigger life. But the thing about this is that it takes courage. It takes courage to take these steps. It takes courage to step into your calling. It takes courage to pick a path and to make decisions and to not just, I want comfort, but I want life, you want to know what has become crystal clear to me is that when we want it all, also known as you want your cake and eat it too, which is a super strange saying, by the way, as a side note. But if you want to have your cake and eat it too, if you want all of, and you do not want to have to be forced to pick, to sacrifice something in order to gain yourself, really, on your path, Well, it means that you are in avoidance. You are avoiding the very essence of what life is, of the primary challenge that we are all called to, which is to make a decision. We have to make decisions in our businesses. We have to make decisions in our relationships. We have to make decisions in our careers. We have to make decisions with how we spend our time. And if we just want all the comforts without risking anything or sacrificing any, well, that is cowardice. And it's certainly not courage. It is absolutely and certainly not courage. It is the path of avoidance. And what we're called to do is to reject the path of avoidance and choose the path of adventure, because that's all life is. It's one big adventure. Somewhere along the line, we lose that sense of adventure. We lose that connectedness with our true selves. Some people call it the inner child. Some people call it their soul. And you lose that. And you just start playing it really safe. When we think about our companies, there's that time when you start your company, man, and it is just like, it's an adventure. Every day is an adventure, and there's wins and there's losses. But I'll tell you what, pretty much every one of those days is awesome. And we're learning and we're growing. And there's somewhere along the line that we mature. Yes, life or business. You can listen to this either way, talking business now, but it's an absolute parallel where we mature and we start to play it safe. And, oh, I don't want to pick that. I don't want to pick. I want to hold on to what I have. That's the day that your business starts to die. That is the moment it starts to die, because that's the moment that you have stepped out of courage, out of the path of growth, of adventure, of challenge, which is a synonym for life. And you're picking the path of cowardice and avoidance. Now, faith is an interesting concept, because faith is easily a well from which we can derive and draw upon courage. And what is faith? I'll tell you something that has become enlighteningly clear. Faith is not in our mind. It is not intellectualized. It is truly, like Tony Robbins is an example. He's always talked about get out of your head, get into your heart. You cannot access faith without being able to do that, without being able to drop in to our hearts. I heard a really wise man say recently that I had the opportunity to learn with. He was talking about addiction. So he was going on about addiction for a little while, just talking about it. And then he said something that really hit me. Because, I'm not addicted, quote unquote, to anything. Not addicted to substances, to alcohol, to, any of the traditional addictions, tobacco, I'm not any of them. Then he said, some of you are addicted to thinking. And boom, it hit me. I am so in my head, overthinking it all, that if we can't drop in to our heart, well, then faith becomes really difficult to access. And it's only important because courage is such an important part of life, because trusting yourself and betting on yourself is such an important part of this adventure that we're all on. Because having a trust and a faith in your instincts all requires that alignment with self, and to just drop into the heart and out of the mind. And yes, this is a business conversation. I understand this is Masters of Business podcast. No, I haven't lost my mind. It is because what happens when you're making a business decision? Do you have every answer, every variable, every possible outcome all mapped out, and you know exactly what's going to be the right and the wrong and the right path and the best return? Do you always know? Or once you've taken into account all the data, and sure, that's important. Absolutely. Okay. It's a science and an art, life and business. Once you've taken a look at the data, at the variables, what's important? What's important? The best in the world, the most effective business people that have changed the planet. What happens is they drop in to their instinct, to their gut, to their heart, to their soul, to their faith. And it is where courage lives. And so you can call it any one of those things, but that is so important. So important. And I realize that on this podcast here in this episode, I'm not giving you like, well, here's how you do it. The here is how is for another day, another time, and another conversation. My intent here is to place awareness on how important it is that you're able to do so. I just want to end with a quick dialogue because I think it all ties together regarding manipulation, which is on the opposite end of the spectrum from courage. When we don't have courage, then often what happens is the mind, the ego, we over-intellectualize, all that takes over. And so we learn to navigate through manipulation rather than through the heart, through courage, through faith. What's interesting is that our reputations can be earned or they can be gained through manipulation. So manipulation is this interesting thing. It will provide these ephemeral illusion, kind of an oasis of gains, including that of reputation. But it does not last. It has a different vibration. People feel it, they sense it, and they absolutely know. Whether they can articulate it or not, at a conscious or subconscious level, they know the difference between manipulation and authenticity. It is the easiest thing to sniff out. I mean, we are built as mechanisms, as vessels, to sniff this out, to sense it. It's a vibration. And it's important that you know if somebody is manipulating you. If you're ever asked to sacrifice something, to risk something by somebody who is not risking or sacrificing anything themselves, you are being manipulated. And by the way, they might not know they're doing it. Let's flip that around. If you are asking somebody or a group of people in your life right now to sacrifice or risk anything of theirs, their time, their resources, their attention, their energy, and you are not willing to also make a decision to do the same, you are manipulating them. Now, I know you're not doing it from a malice, right, or from a bad place, or even from a place of consciousness, and that's the entire point. This entire life, this entire journey, the whole purpose of it all is to place our awareness on what's really going on, because that's where change happens. That's where change is possible. And to get there, sometimes it takes a little bit of pain, a little bit of suffering, often and most often does. I know this because I am not speaking from a preaching, I'm not on my altar preaching here. I discovered what I'm sharing with you within myself. And very recently, I discovered within myself that, hold on a moment, if I'm asking for somebody to sacrifice energy, time, presence, resources, and I'm not willing to do the same, I won't make a decision. I am not choosing a path. I want to have my cake and eat it too. Well, that is the very definition of not just manipulation, but of cowardice. And so all this works together. And it is an absolute truth, like my coach said, that what's going on privately will show up publicly. It will show up in your business. It will show up, of course, in your relationships. It will show up in your finances. It will show up in your decision-making. You know where it's going to show up too? It's going to show up in your self-belief. And so it's a beautiful thing. I think it's incredibly important to just place awareness on it. And that is the antidote, by the way. That's the prescription. Once you have awareness placed on any of that, then you're able to release what's not serving you, and you can keep those things that are. And most importantly, it gives you an opportunity to drop in. And that's a whole nother episode, seminar, what have you. So, on how to drop in. But the step one is where you act in the relationship of life. Remember, life equals challenge, of suffering, of manipulation, and most importantly, of courage to come in front of those things and solve for them, to heal them, and to be able to serve all the people that I know you want to serve. I know you want to because I know I want to. It's interesting, man, how that happens. I know you want to simply because I know I want to. And when that wasn't true, when it wasn't true that I knew people genuinely wanted to serve, well, guess what I've discovered? Life is one big giant mirror. And so this is just really fascinating part of life's adventure. And I'm telling you, your business is a reflection, a direct reflection of where you are in your personal development. So that's why I'm bringing you this today on Masters of Business. Drop in the comments, go to Spotify, go to iTunes, go to YouTube so we can see each other face to face. This is on every one of those platforms. And let me know through the comments, particularly on YouTube where there's comments, how you're processing this, what you think. And I'd love to continue the conversation there. And I just ask you one more thing, by the way. All I ask is if this is helpful to you. This podcast in general has just given you value. We don't charge for it. We put our time into it. Just simply share it with somebody. Like, subscribe, depending on what platform you're on, because that's how the algorithm knows to share it with more people so we can make a bigger impact. This is Masters of Business. I'm Dan Beer, and we're out.